There's been too many times I've seen screenshots like this while scrolling through Instagram or the Minecraft Builds subreddit. Like, come on, I can barely even see it. It's all warped and tiny. Look me in the eyes and tell me you think this is good. Yeah, that's what I thought. So in this video, I'm gonna show you how your screenshots can go from looking like this to looking like this. I'll be going over a bunch of different topics, so be sure to watch the whole video to learn everything. Disclaimer. Most of the things I talk about in this video are my opinion, which I feel is at least somewhat valid, as I've been taking screenshots of my own builds for quite some time now, which you can check out over on my Instagram at disruptive_builds. Now, let's get on to the first topic. This first tip is absolutely the most important, and that is to change your FOV. When you use anything above 50, it'll start to make your build look warped, so instead, lower it to 30 and you can notice an instant improvement. Everything looks clear and visible instead of skewed and hard to see. Some builds may need a slightly higher FOV, so I'd recommend not going anywhere above 40. Also, for interior shots, I would recommend going to 40 to 60, depending on how much you want to see in one image. So now that we have our FOV set correctly, let's head into the next topic. Finding the perfect angle of your build is definitely challenging, so most of it will come down to your own personal preferences. But for a general rule of thumb, you usually want to get a slightly high and to the side angle, as this usually works for every build. Some bigger house builds may benefit from a more frontal angle, others a more diagonal angle, but it mostly depends on what you think looks best for your build. Bonus pro tip, if you build on your own server like I do and have the essentials plugin, you can type /set_home and then a name to save the exact angle that you want, and you can type /home name to return back to it. A lot of screenshots I see on Reddit are sometimes not even centered in the middle of the screen, so make sure you always center your build in the middle of the frame. I wouldn't really bother with using the rule of thirds, which is a photography rule, as in my opinion, Minecraft builds usually look the best when centered in the middle of the frame. The next thing to do is play around with the time of day. I usually like to choose an early morning time or an early afternoon, but it's entirely up to you. I also would try to refrain from taking screenshots at nighttime, as it's obviously harder to see unless if the build is completely lit up. The time of day is also much more prominent and important if you decide to use. Having shaders on for your screenshot is almost like cheating, as it will instantly make a build look 2 times better, and it's easy to do. Now, even though you might not be able to run shaders that well, just remember, you only need to have them on when you're ready to take your screenshot. So even if you only get 30, 15, 2 frames per second, it doesn't really matter because you only need it for the screenshot. I would strongly recommend using BSL shaders, as it is highly customizable and is used by most pro builders due to its versatility and how professional it can look. I would also recommend changing some important settings, as they will help with the clarity of your screenshots, because some of the default settings are not that great for taking screenshots. Firstly, go into atmosphere and turn light shaft strength and fog density to the lowest. Next, head to post effects, turn off bloom, and set lens flare strength to the lowest. These are the exact settings I use most of the time, but feel free to use this as a starting point and change things to the way you want it to look. If you want a more spooky, gloomy picture, for instance, you could increase the fog density. If you want a brighter picture, you could try playing around with the bloom. These are just a couple of ways you could use shaders to enhance your screenshot, but for the most part, I would just stay with the settings I suggested. Now, obviously, with shaders comes shadows, and these are an important aspect to always keep in mind. The direction of the shadows are a great tool for changing the way your build looks. For the most part, you usually want the shadows to be at the back left or back right of the build, as this means the front of the build will be in the light and clearly visible. There are some instances where it may look better having the front of the build slightly or completely in shadow, so to change the direction of the shadow, there are 3 ways. You could completely rotate your build, whether that be using World Edit or completely rebuilding it, but the easier way is actually by using a setting within BSL, and that is sun path rotation. You can use this to change the position of the sun depending on the time of day, so play around with this setting to get the shadows exactly how you want. Also, another way to change the shadows is by the time of day. You can see here how different the morning hours can look compared to the early afternoon hours, and the time of day can also give your build a completely different look and feel. Now let's look into post-processing effects. You can get these effects either directly through BSL shaders or through a photo editing app like Photoshop. I personally prefer Photoshop, as it is easier for me, as I have more control in dialing in the perfect look. but I understand that not everyone has access to Photoshop, so thankfully you can achieve some of this in-game using BSL shaders. Now just a brief explanation of these effects. Basically, saturation and vibrance help bring out the colors of an image. Saturation affects every color's intensity, while vibrance specifically targets the colors that aren't too colorful already. Upping the contrast increases the ratio between light and dark in your screenshot. You can see here how increasing the contrast makes the shadows and already dark areas darker and also brings out the colors a little bit more. To get to these settings within BSL shaders, head to color grading and tone map, and then you can adjust the two bottom sliders. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a way to change the contrast within BSL, but let me know in the comments if you found a way. To do this in Photoshop, simply open the adjustments panel and add on a brightness and contrast and also vibrance adjustment layers. Then just play around with these sliders. Bonus pro tip. You can get this really nice effect on your screenshots really easily through BSL settings. All you have to do is head to Post Effects, turn on Depth of Field, and play around with the Depth of Field Strength slider. To get this dialed in perfectly, it may take some time playing around with the slider and also moving closer or further away from your build. But once it's dialed in, it looks great. You could also pull this effect off in Photoshop pretty easily too if you aren't using a shader with the depth of field setting or are just wanting more control over how much blur there is or where you want the blur to be. Firstly, open up Photoshop, duplicate your picture twice with Ctrl and J. Then select the top layer and outline your build with the pen tool. This is also how these styles of thumbnails are made. Once you're finished outlining, right click and choose Make Selection. Then hold Ctrl, Shift, and J to cut your build out from the background. Then delete the background layer we cut the build out from. Select the second layer and add a Gaussian blur. If you want the front of the background to not be blurred, get the eraser tool, set it to the soft brush, and just simply erase the areas you want to be sharp again. I'd recommend cropping your images to a 1:1 ratio, especially for Instagram too. It depends on where you're looking to post your screenshots though, so if you're only keeping these images for yourself or just sending them to your friends, you don't really need to focus on this part too much. But if you're uploading your screenshots to Instagram or Reddit, I would strongly recommend cropping to 1:1. It is the best ratio for Instagram and for Reddit and is also great for viewing on mobile. If you were to upload it as a 16:9 ratio, it would end up looking like this on mobile, which isn't easily viewable. Alright, so I'm pretty sure I've covered everything. If there was anything I missed, let me know in the comments and I'll add it to a pinned comment. So I hope this video helped you out with your screenshot taking in Minecraft, and if it did, be sure to give the video a like and also consider subscribing for build tutorials and other Minecraft tutorials like this one. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video.